Morning, everybody. I am Carolyn from Midwest Manufacturers, and I welcome you to one of our educational webinar series. And today we're going to learn about how to create a solid, fair chance process, the do's and don'ts and best practices for our workforce development series. We have presenter Richard Owen from Fair Chance Employer, who's going to take over here in a moment. And he is being joined by Donna, who is going to also answer any questions. We will be recording this and sharing it with everyone who registered. And we also, I will be emailing it to everyone that has registered. And we do ask that there will be opportunities throughout the presentation to turn your microphone on and ask questions. So we encourage you to do that. And from here, I will turn it over to you, Richard.
Well, thanks very much. Welcome everybody to the Fair Chance discussion today. This is going to be perhaps different than other presentations you may have seen. A lot of folks, a lot of times you'll see people talk about why you should hire folks with a criminal record, or some programs that are going on in prisons and those kinds of things. But this is going to be basically a nuts and bolts HR discussion largely on what are the rules and how do we comply with them. Because as you all know, part of our job, a major part of our job in HR is we're the compliance people, and we figure out what are the rules. We design processes to make sure that those bases are touched. We design forms and so forth. We do training so that our organization's assets are protected. And one of the things I discovered as I began this journey is that I learned a whole lot about this whole process that I never knew as an HR director. So I've been an employer my entire career. That's my background. I've been business owner. I've been HR consultant, done HR, taught HR classes and so forth. So I really, while I was working as a few years ago as an HR and safety consultant and then a director for a group of companies, one of the companies had a shop where we repaired vehicles, and we were wanting to hire a diesel mechanic. And the guy we liked, we found out, was a level 1 sex offender. And all my years, I had never hired anybody with that serious of an offense before. And I had no clue. I didn't know process to follow. I just didn't know how to make that decision. I didn't know what the statutes meant. And I just thought, boy, I need help. So I reached out to places like S.C.O.R.E and MRA, and I talked to a number of HR attorneys and other senior HR people. And I can remember looking at the folder on my desk thinking, I should have something in my folder that reflects that we did our due diligence and that I followed these rules. And that's all people would tell me was, well, you need to follow the green rules. And I kept thinking, I know what the green rules are. I need to know how to follow them. I need to know how. What documents do I need to have in my possession, and how do I do that? So then a couple of years later, I actually started looking into the process, because I was just thinking, there are hundreds of manufacturers and hundreds of employers who have positions to fill. They're having trouble keeping people from starting and leaving, the revolving door, and they have trouble finding enough people to staff their organizations with. And a lot of people are looking at growth this year, and it's going to be even worse with all the pressure and competition for good help. And then you have all these people getting out of incarceration that are trying to restart their lives, and they're having trouble finding work. So I thought, somebody needs to figure this out. So I took about almost 2 years doing this research, and I already knew about the HR side of things, of course. So I took most of my time, and I was on the law enforcement, criminal justice side of things, trying to figure out what can I find out from these people and about this world and about this population that I can put in the hands of employers so that they don't have to go through what I went through. And so the presentation that you see today is about 20 20 some minutes on 20 some months of research. So, and today with us, we have Donna Plouffe, who's a colleague of mine. She's works for a background check company. I found her to be a tremendous resource. She's going to be able to offer some slides and answer questions about background checks. So this is going to be an outstanding hour, time well spent for you. And when you get done, you should have every question that you ever had about fair chance hiring answered. So I'm going to go ahead and start my slides here. And then we'll get the slideshow going. Okay, everybody see the blue lady? So if you would, I think most of you are mic'd, but I'm going to stop every so often. I've got a slide that says questions. And if you got a question, we're going to cover a lot of topics and we'll be moving pretty fast. But if you have any questions, we're going to stop and then allow you just unmute and go ahead and ask your question then. So we're going to talk about evaluating candidates with a criminal record. And I've already kind of given you my story, how I got here. And now I've got the obligatory disclaimer. I'm not an attorney, and the advice given in this presentation is not to be taken as legal advice. I had an attorney that told me I needed to do that. So, okay, so here's the topics we're going to cover. We're going to talk about ban the box, background checks. What if we decide not to hire? How do we handle that? There's three major concerns that we have as employers when addressing this population. We'll talk about that. We're going to touch on negligent hire exposure, what that is, and how you make sure you're protected. We're going to talk about what are the actual EEOC guidelines we're supposed to follow. I think you'll find something new out of that. Why is it so difficult to follow these guidelines? We're going to cover that. We're going to touch on the four most common errors I see that employers are making. So hopefully if you're doing something wrong, we'll be able to catch that for you. How does our website, fairchanceemployer.com, solve these issues that we're raising? And then finally, where I started, what should I have in my candidate folder to document my compliance? So a few years ago, when the applicant pool dried up, the HR hiring managers, we had to really kind of get creative and try to formulate some strategies and avenues to recruit people that maybe were on the fringe groups that we hadn't necessarily focused on before. And if you kind of boil those down, it kind of falls in about five categories: the seniors, folks with disabilities, BIPOC immigrants, and folks with a criminal record. And as it turns out, folks with a criminal record is the only one of these groups that comes to us with state and federal laws we have to follow to comply with those regulations and those guidelines. So what they are is the Minnesota Department of Human Rights enforces the Ban the Box statute. The Federal Trade Commission, via the Federal Credit Reporting Act, oversees the background check policy, and those rules are hard to understand sometimes. That's why we have background check companies to do that for us, to keep us legal. And then, of course, the EEOC is the government agency that oversees the hiring process. And they've got some published guidelines that you probably have, if you've been in HR very long, you probably have access to those, but we're going to be covering those and making sure that you have a full understanding of what that document really does for us. Okay, so let's start with ban the box. Unfortunately, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is the ban the box statute, and I don't know one HR attorney I've talked to for a long time, ever since this came out, that likes the way this is written, because it causes too much confusion. It doesn't make real clear when we're supposed to get the criminal background check. And I've just kind of highlighted in here what these HR attorneys say. If you ask them, they're going to say, don't do it. You wait till after conditional offer of employment is made to the application, to the applicant. So you do your interviewing, go through all that stuff, and we'll cover that in a second. But you do your offer, and then when they accept the offer, that's when you do the background check. That they always say, go through door number 2. Wait, and there are about 37 states that have ban the box statutes, and some of them just say plainly, don't get your background check until after your criminal or your condition of offer is accepted. So in fact, if you go on the Minnesota Human Rights website, they tried to add some clarity to it. It's not up there anymore, but this is what they said. And he said, employees may still conduct a criminal background check, but provided after the applicant has been interviewed. So you have to wait till the interview's over. There's other steps you do after that. Then you make the offer and then you do the background check. So here's the normal progression that we follow. We're all about process. I always say that if HR people were in charge of the Treasury Department, all the dollar bills would say, "In process we trust," and this is the normal process. So interview, reference check for prior employment, you have the signed job offer, then you do the criminal background check, and then you get into the individualized assessment things that we're going to spend some time on today. That's the next step after you get the background check. That helps you make that decision on whether this background check affects my hiring decision or not. So unmute and questions from that. Any questions on ban the box stuff? Okay. So now we're going to talk about background checks and what to do if we decide not to hire. And Donna is joining me. She's a official with the Trusted Employees. It's a large background check company nationwide, globally, actually. She's an outstanding resource. And I'm going to stop sharing and turn our meeting over to her, and she's going to give you some outstanding information.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Let me go and get my screen set up. Are you guys all seeing my screen? Can you see that?
Not yet.
No.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, perfect. All right. So Trusted Employees, we are part of MRI Real Estate Software. We've been around since about 1994. I've been with them going beyond 20 years now. And our whole premise is to help our clients to stay compliant. And there's no place that is more important than for pre-employment screening. So under pre-employment screening, I always like to ask clients, how much do you really know about compliance? Well, first and foremost, it's making sure that you understand what your role is under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the EEOC, and the Federal Trade Commission. While we are not lawyers and we don't play one on TV, we can at least help you understand the documents and the information that you need to share with your applicants to protect their rights and to keep you compliant. So the first part of that is understanding what your role is. For the most part, your role starts with permissible purpose, which is generally employment. You are trying to employ someone, but this could also be for volunteers if you're a nonprofit, because the FCRA considers volunteers the same as potential employees. You need to make sure you do your due diligence, which is screen enough for that particular position to protect your work, your employees, and people that they may be in contact with. And then consistency. Everybody in the same job level needs to be screened exactly the same. So think of, let's say, a VP of finance versus somebody who's like an entry-level clerk. You wouldn't necessarily screen them the same because the level of trust of what you expect that person to do in each of those positions could be vastly different. So the FCRA allows you to differentiate your background screening depending on the job and the level of trust, but everybody in that level all must have the exact same kind of background check. Then we have green factors that the EEOC came out with. And this is really to allow people that may fit under Title VII to take a look at the relevance of the record versus the time of when it occurred and allow them an opportunity to chat with you and have that conversation of why that occurred and if there were extenuating circumstances around that. So it's really a way for you to have that conversation, to give them as much of a chance as possible to explain what is on their background check. And we call that adverse action. So adverse action should be done whenever there is something that in whole or in part is based on the background check and you're considering taking an adverse action against hiring that person. Adverse action at Trusted Employees is a process where you can quickly and easily generate a letter. It includes the actual copy of the report. It all gets sent to the applicant and allows them 7 days or 5 business days to respond back to you with an explanation, to call you, to have a communication as to what's on their background check and what may be the issue. Never in this process should you ever say anything about calling out any aspect of that background check. And why is that? Well, courts have known to get things mixed up. It could be identity theft. I've had all of those happen. It could be that an expungement should have been in place and wasn't. We've had all of these things. So you just want to send an adverse action letter with a copy of the report and say, please review this letter and get back to me. Just send the letter and they can explain what is on their background check. Do you have any questions at this point regarding the setting up of background screening, the components in terms of compliance, as well as adverse action? Can you see, Richard, if anyone has any questions? Okay, I'm going to move on here.
No questions that I'm seeing.
Perfect. Okay. So there are a lot of different types of products that go into a background check. I oftentimes will get a question, well, what does your background check cost? And I'll say, well, what are you checking for? As you can see here, there are a number of criminal searches, motor vehicle searches, credit-related searches, financial, medical, verification searches, and then drug testing. So the background check is the culmination of what is it that you need to fully vet that position. And a reputable background screening company can sit down with you and help you craft that based on the position. You should never have to be pigeonholed into a cookie cutter background check. It should be crafted around what your actual needs are. And this also includes international background checks. Now, we can do criminal, education, and employment. They are very expensive, and the turnaround time can be very long depending on what you're doing. So I always ask clients to have caution if they're going to do international. But that is something that we can always talk about. And the other side of background checks, before I turn this back over to Dick, and that is, why do some background checks take so long? Well, it could be a component of the human factor. I'm going to go back here a little bit. Anything where we have to ask someone for information instead of pulling it ourselves from court files could take longer. So verification searches like employment and education, professional license or reference checks, these things can take longer because we're relying on a person to get that information to us. And it depends on them answering their emails or their phone or their fax to get that information back to us. But what I want to also let you know is, in the United States, there are no two states that are exactly the same. And at the county level, you could have one county that is very easy to get information from, and another county that can take forever because you have court clerks and they want you to go through the court clerk. So, couple of examples. We're here in Minnesota. We pull at the county level, all the counties in Minnesota. Our court reporters can pull that information for you, and we can usually get that by same day or next day. But let's look at Illinois. In this case, they don't publish the date of birth. So you have to go to the courthouse to get that information. So think of Chicago, highly populated. Chicago, which is Cook County, can take 5 to 7 days easy. Then you have states like California that have not only redacted the full date of birth from all their counties, they haven't staffed up. And now you actually have to make appointments to try and get your background check. So I've seen some California background checks take 3 weeks. So a good background screening company can help you understand why things are taking longer and help you plan a little bit better as you're hoping to fill positions. I'm going to stop right here, not only for questions, but also turn it over to Dick. And then we'll see where we go from there if there's any other information that you'd like from me. Any other questions at this point?
Nothing on the chat.
Okay.
Yep, and please feel free to turn on your microphones if you have questions.
Okay. Did I stop sharing? I'm not sure I did that correctly.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's still up there.
Okay. It's not, I'm not able to get to that one quite yet. Okay. Okay. Can you help me with that? For some reason, I'm not.
There'd be a little red button at the bottom of your screen that says stop share.
I'm not able to get to that. It's not letting me do that.
Maybe you need to resize your screen. You can use the control button in your wheel. Sometimes that'll make something, you kind of shrink your screen. Sometimes that'll appear.
Okay. I apologize. I thought I could go from one to the other and it's not letting me.
You might see an option to stop sharing if you go back to the Zoom. So with how your screen looks now, if you click on your Zoom image and your taskbar, I think you should be able to also have an option there to stop sharing.
Okay, it's not letting me. I'm not able to get into
Up on the top right, if you click where it says share, that's kind of that peach color. Does that do anything? Way up there to the right. There you go.
Okay.
Try that.
Okay. Okay. It's not letting
Oh, no,
me.
you may have to end and then come back in.
Okay, I'm gonna have to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll let you back in.
Okay. I'm used to Teams. I apologize.
Yeah.
Oh, dang it. Oh, geez.
I think you have to open the Zoom app. You're currently in PowerPoint.
Okay. Yeah, it's not letting me at all.
Well, let me see if I can change the share setting screen here and see if that, and then I'll reopen that. So hold.
Okay.
All righty. Very good. So,
All right. I'm gonna switch it so you can share your screen now too. So hold on one second, okay?
all right.
Um, all right, we should be good to go.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Carolyn.
Give it a
Appreciate the
try
help.
here. Let's see.
Okay, we up with Donna's slide there. We good?
Yep, I
Got
can
Donna's
see a
slide
picture
there?
of Donna now. So, yep,
Okay.
and
All right.
Donna's back in. Okay.
Okay, so we've had time for just one last quick thing before we move on to the next topic. Any copies about, or any questions about background check world? All righty. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the three major concerns and what about a negligent hire or negligent hire concern. So here they are. What my my experience plus talking to all these HR people, given presentations and talk with people individually, this kind of boils it down. I don't understand what a given statute on a background check really means, and that makes perfect sense. We're not criminal justice people. And what I learned is that, the statutes and the sentencing guidelines and all those kinds of things, those things were created by the legislature for the law enforcement and criminal justice world. That's not our world. And unfortunately, both the HR, hiring world and the criminal justice world, they're two silos and they really aren't designed to talk to one another. And that's why it took me so long to try to find something that would be helpful for employers. But nobody looks at a 609.52 theft felony and understands what that really means. So that's one of the things we're going to address today. How do we document that we followed the EEOC guidelines? Donna talked about that. Documenting those are exceedingly hard. I will go to background check companies, will give these webinars, and you've probably been to some of them. And when they get, it happens the same for all of them. They get to the point where they're explaining all the rules and they get down to where they're talking about how you document your processes, and they just don't have an answer. They just say, well, you got to come up with a spreadsheet or you got to figure out a worksheet or something to, to log all your stuff on. And that's just not an acceptable answer. So that's one of the things that we created our website to solve. And then the third one is, what documentation do we need to guard against a negligent hire lawsuit? That is always in the mind. Most of you have heard what that is, and we'll talk about it for a minute. But that's always in the mind. What happens if this goes south? What happens if the guy falls off the wagon? What if he gets in a fight with somebody? So what happens if I hire this person that I know comes with some risk and it doesn't work out? Can I get sued? And the short answer for that is, and this is from an article from S.C.O.R.E here just about a year and a half ago, and I'll just define what that is because not everybody knows what negligent hire risk is. So negligent hiring is a civil cause of action of which an employer is found liable because they hired someone they knew or should have known was likely to reoffend. So the highlighted part is kind of the answer. And unfortunately for us, the bar is very low for employers. I mean, the protections against a negligent hire is really easy. And this is what they say. This is what I've heard from HR attorneys as well. In almost all cases in which employers have been found liable, is because the employer's vetting process of candidates was not very not comprehensive. So employers who conduct record checks and thorough background screens, they're okay. So the short answer to that is, if you're doing a background check through a reputable background check company, that is your get out of jail free card. All you have to do is produce that and they'll say, oh, well, okay. Because and I'm told this by HR attorneys, because the bar is, if your process includes what is the normal process for considering these people, then you're not negligent. So if you're not doing background checks, please start doing them and start doing them with a reputable company. Any questions about negligent hire that any of you have? Okay. So what are the EEOC guidelines? What are these green rules that we're talking about? So I think all of you got a handout in the mail from me. If you have that available, that'd be time to pull that out. This is right straight from the EEOC website. If you go to small tips for small businesses and then check criminal records, this is the document that you're going to see. And the original document in 2012 that the EEOC published that we get our green rules from, that's named for the court case Green versus Missouri Pacific Railroad. That's why they're called the Green Rules. This is like the Cliff Notes version for small businesses. And this is just really kind of cut to the chase. What do we need to know? So if you look at the back and number 4 there, these are the green rules, and we'll read them. Determine how the applicant's criminal history relates to the risks and responsibilities of the job. Among other things, consider, and I've circled that word because we're going to come back to it later, the nature or gravity of the crime. In other words, how serious is it? Is it arson or is it shoplifting? The time that's passed, that makes perfect sense. If it happened a long time ago, it's not much consequence. If it happened in the current year, then that's a concern for me as an employer. And the nature of the job. What they mean by that is, how does the crime, the statute that was violated, they're convicted of, compare with the duties of the job description and nature of the jobs. The examples you hear quite often is if I'm trying to hire somebody to run a drill press in my shop, and I find out this person's got a couple of DUIs in the last couple of years, and that's not really much of a concern. They're not going to be driving for work. That's just not really, it doesn't intersect anywhere, and there's not anything in their job they're going to be doing along those lines. However, if I'm hiring a delivery driver, that's probably going to be a deal breaker. So you have to consider those things. The other example you hear is one that Donna gave, and that's the fiscal officer. You expect a higher level of trust with that person, and if you find that they've were guilty of violating some type of monetary crime, embezzlement or something, well, that would be a deal breaker for that position. So the nature of the job, how does the background check statutes compare to what their duties are going to be? Is there any intersection? Is there any overlap? Are we putting that person in a similar situation that particular crime occurred? Those are the 3 green rules. And the 4th one there is, we'll get to in a minute. It's talking about having that conversation that Donna alluded to about their criminal history. So questions on that? I've run through that kind of quickly. All right. So why is it so difficult to follow these guidelines? Here's the problem. In Minnesota, we have 4 levels of crime, right? These are the ones that are going to appear on your background check. And but if you look at other states, they have, like Wisconsin, they've got felony A, felony B, felony C. I mean, a lot of states do it that way, but we just have 1 felony. So if you want to unmute, does anybody know how many levels of felonies Minnesota has, if any?
Is there 5?
No, good. That's a common answer, but thank you. That's not the answer. So anyway, and I'll get it to you. There, Minnesota, and I ask this question every place I give a presentation. I've got a Starbucks gift card in my briefcase that I will give to somebody who's got the answer, and I think it's expired. I mean, nobody knows. I didn't know the answer to this question. I just looked at felony and thought felony. But Minnesota has 11 levels of felonies, and you find them here in the sentencing guidelines document. You can Google that and find it. But here's what it looks like. It's not a sortable field, a sortable database. It's just a document of 8, 9, 10 pages, something like that. And it lists all of the severity levels on the left. It's got a numeric code for them. And then it lists the title, and then it lists the statute number, and if there's a subdivision involved. Some statutes will have different statutes for the kind of different severities of the crime. Some statutes will have one statute with different paragraphs with different severities. So it's kind of hard to follow. Again, this makes perfect sense to the criminal justice world, but it kind of makes it hard for us as employers to really kind of figure this out. So here's the 1 to 11 general felonies have this numerical system. However, you go to sex-related crimes, they have an alpha scoring method. You go to drug-related crimes and they have an alphanumeric system. So how in the world, as employers, are we going to have to abide by the severity of the crime guideline by EEOC if you've got this convoluted system of judging severity by the state? So this was something I had to work a lot, spend a lot of time on with the people in the legislative library and the people, different levels of law enforcement, to kind of come up with a kind of an average score for you that will give you that severity statute. The other part of that is these levels can change. I've got a database with about 1,000 statutes in our database, and I bet I make 50 changes a year. Sometimes the severity level changes, like the drug-related crimes, remember a couple of years ago, those things all changed. So it's really hard for an employer to try to stay on top of all this stuff. And that's why I thought, it would make a lot of sense to have one entity figure all this out and just make it available to everybody. So the levels can change. And if you've got a location in more than one state, each state has its own level of statutes. And in this case, the top one, theft of a firearm, 609.52, subdivision, whatever. In Wisconsin, that's statute number 943.20. The severity level is graded differently, the penalties are different, and the narrative is different. So if you've got more than one state, how in the world do you have an equitable system to judge these crimes and the severity level if the states are doing it differently? So it makes it really hard. So the solution we came up with, again, a numerical scoring, has solved that problem. Again, questions on that? Okay, so 4 most common errors. First one is we consider candidates with a criminal record, but not to have a violent crime in their history. I still hear some of that out there. Was dealing with the steel company just a couple weeks ago, and that will get you in trouble with the EEOC. That is, we're not allowed, and we'll see later, we're not allowed to have any blanket statements like that. And we can't have a blanket, we're not going to allow anybody with a certain crime to work for us. And we'll see why that's later. But the main reason for that is the crime data by race. And this is the whole reason that was the impetus behind the 2012 EEOC document that we call the Green Rules document. That's why it was brought into place, is because people had this violent crime standard. And because African Americans, for the short answer, 13% of the population, but they account for 23% of the convicted violent crimes. Well, if you say we're not going to hire anybody with a violent crime, then you're adversely affecting that particular population. So that was a reason for the issuance of those guidelines, and that's why you can't have any blanket exclusions. Second error, not using a reputable company to do your background check. Donnie, you want to mic up for a second? I got a question for you. I have people all the time that say, well, we go on social media and we do this and that. Why is that a bad idea? Just doing it on your own.
Well, you could be using information that you shouldn't be using. I've had a number of situations where someone will say, hey, someone says that this person was arrested for this, that, and the other thing. And number one, they could just be Googling a name. And even though Donna Plouffe does not sound like it's a unique name, I guarantee you there are probably 50 Donna Plouffes out there that I can quickly find very easily online. So is it the correct person that they're actually looking at? Secondly, you can't use arrest records. I can't tell you the number of times that, and I work with a lot of public schools as well. Someone will say, hey, someone Googled their name and, they were arrested or they had this, that, or the other thing. And you can only use court records where something has been done, not arrest records, because those are illegal because there is no disposition for those.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Use a reputable company. If you're getting charged $10 for a background screen, I can tell you they're not a reputable company. So, to make your job easy, just call Donna and she'll get you squared up. The third one is not holding the EEOC criminal history interview. We talked about this earlier. And we'll talk a little bit about more, but that's a mistake that a lot of people are making. A lot of people haven't even heard that that's a requirement, but if you take a look at that EEOC document, number 7 there, give applicants an opportunity to explain their criminal history. It says provide them with an opportunity to respond and consider reevaluating them based on their explanation. So when use that word reevaluating, that's really important because what that means is you bring them in for you get the background check and there's something on it. That part of your process is you bring that person in and you have a conversation about it and you provide them the opportunity to talk about it, explain it, tell you what they've learned about it, and then you were supposed to reevaluate them based on their explanation. So we don't really make our final decision until we have a chance to talk with that person, get their side of the story, and then you take notes. You have some questions that you use like an interview, and you take notes. That's your proof that was done, and then you make your final reevaluating decision. And I've had that work both ways. I've had people a criminal history show up that I think, well, that really doesn't bother me too much. And I get the person in there and talk about it. And I just get really kind of uneasy with that explanation. And so I've made decisions that way. And I've made decisions where the other way, where I thought it was kind of a deal breaker. And I get talking to them, I realize, you know what, I think I'm okay with this. So having that conversation is really important. And if you are keeping track of what Target's done, they've had a couple of EEOC lawsuits in the last years. You'd think of any company in Minnesota that would have the best attorneys to be able to figure out how to do this, but they've really gotten some big trouble with the EEOC. And here's just an excerpt of the statement that they issued, a press release, and here's where they talk about it. When this is something they say, no, now we're going to do this. Individuals are given an opportunity to explain your criminal history. So they have started doing this as well. So if you haven't heard about this before, it is part of the EEOC guidelines. So let's do a real quick case study of what that looks like. Let's say I've got a guy that I like for a supervisor in my shop, and I find out that he's got a military background. So I asked for his DD 214. If you don't know what that is, that's their exit document. If you find out somebody's been in the military, you should always ask them for this document. They'll know exactly what you're talking about, and it's got the reason for leaving and all kinds of information on there that we don't have time to go in for today. But that's what I find, and I find out this person was dishonorably discharged for conduct unbecoming. So now I'm not so sure, right? I think, well, do I really want to hire this guy? But I have a process where I bring them in and I talk about their criminal history and how they got to where they were. And I find out in that conversation that this guy's commanding officer was this guy. So, I mean, this really says it all, doesn't it? I mean, you never know till you get to the other side of the story. So they want us to be using an individualized assessment. In fact, those are magic words. That's why I got them italicized in quotes. Those 2 words should be in your policies. They should be on your forms that you use. This is all part of an individualized assessment. We've added that to our candidate dashboard document. I'll show you in a minute. But this is important. In fact, it comes right out of this is the 87-page document. If you for the EEOC, it's listed there. There's a whole paragraph on it. So this is an important part of your evaluation process. So, meaning there's no broad sweeping generalizations or blanket statements about what may not be acceptable. So, if you have any questions, you'll get my contact information. I'm happy to just talk with you about it, help you arrive at maybe a good policy statement, or help you work through that. Again, I worked with a steel company a couple weeks ago, and we figured out a way to satisfy their concerns. So the fourth most common error is something that sometimes you may not hear about it, denying employment by implementing what's called a falsification policy, dictating that any applicant who does not fully or correctly disclose a criminal record is disqualified from employment. This is something actually I did for a little short period of time, a number of years ago. I would ask that person, I want to give them a chance to talk about it. These people are they're very eager because they've been drilled before they leave incarceration, be honest, be upfront, talk about it. And so they kind of come to your interviews are all gung-ho about talking about their history. And sometimes they'll bring it up. And the correct answer is say, thank you for bringing that up. However, we have a part in our policy, our process that will address that if it comes to that. So thank you, but we'll address that later if need be. So the falsification policy, and I just got a question last year from a guy in a presentation I made. He said, we give these people a chance to tell us what's on their criminal history. And if they don't get it right, we kind of disqualify them for non-disclosure. Is that okay? And I said, well, no, you'll get in big trouble doing that because again, that's kind of a blanket thing. And quite honestly, in all the years I've been doing this, in those years I was asking them, people never know. In fact, they don't have access to their own background check unless somebody runs it and gives it to them. You can't do that as an individual. So they don't know what's on their background check. And I've had people tell me stuff that's on there that's not. It's fallen off or been expunged. I've had people leave stuff off that is on there. So I just stopped asking that question because it was getting me nowhere. I mean, I was finding out nothing except they didn't know all the stuff they're on their background check. And I found out that's common and that's normal. So don't put your people through that. And one I'll just throw in for giggles. I just found this out about a week ago. I was called in to help a company with some recruiting, and I found out in Indeed there's some job posting presets, and they had one that was like pages long. And I found out that for this company I was helping, there's one on fair chance hiring, and this company had no people with a criminal record are not encouraged to apply, and they didn't even know they had it. So check your presets for your job boards. That might be something that would be could be catching you and would cause a problem. So questions on that stuff? Okay, so how do we document that we followed the EOC guidelines, that concern? So this is where we come back to that word consider. And this is what baffled me. I had to make a decision with all these three guidelines. And I thought, this is stuff that's happening in my head. How do I put this on paper? How do I document that I'm using a consistent judgment approach for all these different kinds of crimes and different kinds of roles? How do I document that I considered something? So here's how we've solved these issues. So you remember all these jumbo problem here of different ratings. So what we did is we took all these plus the ratings of the different gross to the different misdemeanors, and I did a survey, a lot in people in law enforcement and corrections, so forth, and the looking at the legislative library rules and the sentencing guidelines, and we came up with a rating scale. And it's this is a database that we put it into. So I've got about 1,000 statutes that are from the 5 categories that are most common: crimes against people, crimes against property, drug-related, sex-related, and vehicular. So what our promise is, if there's something that shows up on your background check, any statute, we can give you a severity score for that statute, and it gets printed out on a candidate dashboard, a score sheet for you. So you go on our website, you take your background check, you type in the information from the background check, it takes you a very short period of time, you push send, and within a matter of seconds, this scorecard comes to you that gives you a complete, all the information you need to have a record of the information, the EOC information regarding that person. So instead of having this kind of chaos, you've got a listing of the statute number, the subdivision if necessary, what the crime was, and with a gravity score at the top right-hand corner. That's different for every level of crime. And then you have the adjusted score where you weigh in. This is a big concern. This is a driver with a DUI or not. This is how you weigh in and adjust the score. And then the third guideline, of course, is how long ago did it happen? And that score is reduced but for length of time that's expired since that crime. So you can have no end of the number of statutes that you list on there. And this is just a great scorecard. It's something that's very unique in the industry. Nobody else provides something like this. And this is what helps you document how you're following the EEOC guidelines. So the last thing I'll get to is, we talked about having this interview. We've worked out a list of questions with HR attorneys that you can use in this criminal history interview. So it makes that easy for you too. So questions on all that? All right. So finally, what should I have in my candidate folder to document my compliance? So again, working with HR attorneys and looking at all the statutes and so forth, you should start out with your proof that you're following the guidelines, the candidate dashboard. Then if you say that you're comparing the statute with the job description, you should have both of those in your folder, of course, to prove that you did it. Then you would have the copy of the background check, and then you would have the interview notes for your criminal history discussion. Those are the 5 documents that are going to give you tremendous compliance protection. I've put this formula here in front of a number of HR attorneys, and I've asked them, is there anything else an employer would need to protect them from a negligent hire lawsuit or an EEOC claim? And they've all given me the same answer. Every single one of them. They just said, they thought for a minute and they thought, boy, this is the most extensive protection I've seen. So we're providing some really good data for you to use to background your discussion, or your analysis. So any questions on what we've covered today? All right. So in a week or two, I'll be sending you this document. It's just kind of a check boxes of some of the resources I shared today, and some of them that I didn't have a chance to share, things I found that I think would be valuable for folks trying to set up their process. And if you need to reach out to me, this will be a good QR code to get in touch with me. And I'll leave that on for a second. And then I'll turn it on over to Carolyn.
All right. Well, I am not seeing anything in the chat. Let me look again here. It just went away, of course. So I'm not seeing anything with regard to questions. Well, we just want to thank everyone for joining us. That was really informative. I learned a lot today. I will be downloading this video to our YouTube channel. We invite you to go to the MMA website and check out what we have there. We have many, many webinars from many years of providing these educational seminars. And yeah, so, and I will also be emailing out to you. So we just ask that you please keep an eye on our events and join us again. Anything else? Donna or Richard? No?
No, thank you all.
Thanks,
Well, I want to
Molly.
thank everybody for helping out with our little technical difficulties. Takes a village sometimes.
Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. I will go ahead and end this. And unless there's any quick questions, no?
No.
No. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.